Hi everybody. Today I will be sharing on inflation and property. So is inflation good or bad for property? And is property a good hedge for inflation? This is something that I will answer today because this has been making a lot of news recently. All right, this is the particular headline just from yesterday's papers. Singapore's overall inflation rate, 3.2% is the highest over 8 years. It's not just in Singapore. I think it's affecting the entire globe. But the fact that this is a record high, I think it took everyone aback. So this is the particular news article. It's not just a general inflation. I think the ones that are hitting people very hard would be the core inflation. So core inflation, it's also up, all right, in terms of services and food prices. In general, anticipating more inflation down the road. Okay, before I go into that main slide, I thought I just want to highlight on this topic on why COVID has caused inflation. What is the particular reasons, and when we look back at it, what actually is COVID all about? So let me go through with you over here. Okay, just stay with me through. I'll try to be as clear and short as possible, although I am just going to be rather technical. Okay, but for me, I tend to just want to give you better quality stuff. Okay, so COVID and inflation. We do know that inflation, okay, is a sustained increase in price level for everything. So how is price determined? Price is simply determined by supply and demand. Okay, so that is something that is very basic. So let's take it that just before COVID, everything is like equilibrium, is like a base with demand meeting supply and meeting a certain getting a certain price. But when COVID hits, when COVID hits, immediately I think a lot of people, they don't know what to do. It's not your typical SARS, it's hitting everyone globally. It's a huge pandemic. So indirectly, okay, or directly, demand drops as a result. Demand drops as a result, and therefore price will drop. That is the immediate effect. But as people start to adapt, okay, and we know human beings are the most adaptive creatures on earth. All right, obviously we want to adapt to work things out for something good. And this is what we are also doing over here by moving from, generally, I would say, from offline to online. So you see offline demand shifting on to online demand. Okay, there's something live that I go through and illustrate so that you are clearer. There's this, you start seeing this, but it also causes very different demand for specific product and services. For example, you will see that the demand specifically for oil, because of the lockdown and circuit breaker, is almost non-existent. That's why oil price last year crashed, in fact went in negative territory because no one wants to hold oil. Okay, that is a very good example of a drop in demand causing price to just crater down. But on the other spectrum, as people start to adapt, you see that a lot of people start buying monitors, keyboards, headphones. A lot of queues are forming at IKEA, if you recall, because everybody start to work from home. Okay, so specifically that kind of product, you see more demand and therefore higher price. Is specific in that sense, product and service. Now, when all this is happening, the government also want to help specific industries, but usually they will tend to benefit everyone in general. This is from the quantitative easing, which is so-called the printing of money to increase the money supply in the economy. Wanting to boost confidence and sort of to tell businesses not to stop investment, continue to invest in capital, machineries and everything to maintain account investment. And at the same time, there is targeted support in the form of fiscal policy, fiscal spending, especially in Singapore's context, whereby it's more targeted to affected industries, as mostly to the tourism industries and to the retail side of things, right? So when this comes into play, it actually is adding on, artificially adding on more demand, because people will have more money in the pocket. There's more confidence in that sense. The direct effect is stocks going up, asset starts to go up, but it will definitely spill over to more demand in products and services, and of course, higher prices in general. When all this is also happening, people start to be more adapted to the entire situation, looking at it as an endemic, part of life, you cannot eradicate COVID, things like that. And when that start to happen, and when because of some losing of some policies, you see that from offline, at the start, maybe you can say that the equilibrium before COVID was 50-50. Now it become maybe 100. Just to illustrate, obviously won't be 100. From offline become from 50 to become 0%, and online become 50% to 100%. So it's just a change in how we work, live, and play, rather than stopping it altogether. So the demand still maintains over here, added on by QE and fiscus. So there's more adaptation. That's why we see that when there's working from home, people demanded more space. And in this sense, for property prices went up because people want immediate homes. They want more space. Resale prices actually went up. Okay, and then where are we right now? Maybe just a few months ago, we started with full vaccination of our population. Not full in the sense the majority are being vaccinated. And then you get a lot of optimism. And when that happened, it again added in more demand. It's like a chicken and egg thing, right? When you have optimism, when everything is back to normal, when there's some losing of these restrictions, especially in other countries, the offline is back on stream. At the same time, online is running. So you have demand over here added on by more money in the economy, more optimism, and it starts to just still go forward. That's the reason why demand has been so strong. At the same time, you realize that supply is still relatively constant. In fact, for specific products and services, supply drops. Why? Because if you recall over here, at this stage, when I talk about specific product and services being affected, some being rewarded more, the one that's affected, like the oil industry, a lot of companies actually stop production altogether. They stop their exploration, their exploration investments. They stop all these heavy capital investments. When stopping is easy, but restarting it requires a huge amount of effort, and it also takes years to get it back on stream. That's the reason why supply actually becomes smaller in that sense for some of these things. All right, and supply, in fact, now we have this huge issue of the supply chain management being affected because there's the online that is requiring a lot of demand, and at the same time the offline is getting back on track to demand the same amount of things that it was before COVID happened. So it leads to all these things, supply drop, and it leads to higher price. So in essence, when you look back at COVID almost 2 years ago, a lot of buyers, a lot of owners asked me, hey, how come property prices never crashed because of this COVID crisis? But you really have to understand, even back then, I already understand that COVID was not any kind of financial crisis. It wasn't a subprime crisis. It wasn't an Asian financial crisis. There was no freezing up in capital in the market. If you really think about it, it's just a deviation from offline to online, just changing our working habit. It just forced us to change. And in fact, you think about it, when we move online, when we mechanize things, when we use more technology, in fact, we become even more productive. And when you have all this artificial demand adding on, money adding on, when everything are coming back to normal right now, with the optimism that everybody is showing as much as possible, and then you see this total mismatch in demand and supply. All right, so it's no surprise. I think we all saw it coming. But if you are still thinking that COVID will affect the market, I think you've got to change right now, because you're probably the last one who is still not understanding this situation. Okay, so this is the reason why the COVID and inflation, if you are thinking, I hope it explains a little bit different. I'll see whether I want to include this inside today's topic. If not, I'll just put it on in another episode. All right. Okay, so moving on to today's topic, just last slide. In fact, I just put everything together using all the icons. I love this kind of efficiency so that you can really understand the total picture altogether. So property and inflation, I think you can understand where I'm coming from right at the start, right? Definitely property is a good hedge for inflation. It's a very good hedge. In fact, it's the one that rides on inflation and even benefit even more. All right. So why is that so? If you look at property, I put all the fundamental basic blocks of property here. Now, the main one would be this land scarcity, especially buying property in Singapore, owning a property in Singapore. We know that land is finite over here. We have so many users. I think this is a known fact, but if we really look into it, look at the number of users that we have for our land. Not just for residential, we got our commercial space, our industrial space, we got our restricted areas, we got restricted areas in the sense of our hospitals, our airbase, our police area, you know, even our temples, our places of worship. And then we have something that we can never sacrifice. In fact, we need more of in today's context and in Singapore context, our parks and our water bodies, our reservoirs. So there's so many demand for land, but our land is just so finite. There's so much that we can reclaim. In fact, I think we stopped reclaiming for quite some time already. So land scarcity is one thing that that is underpinning this property and causing property to tag along with inflation to go up. Okay, so let me go straight into labor, which is one main building block of property, especially in today's context. Okay, why I say that? Because 20 to 30 years ago, Singapore is very lucky, and I think we still are, because we are located in the Southeast Asian location, whereby our neighboring countries, with due respect to them, are not as developed as Singapore. So, and they also have a huge population that they need to satisfy work in that sense. So we do have a lot of cheap labor or this construction labor to get. But as we move forward to this day, not even moving forward, even now already, we see that labor costs are expensive. We can't deny them from improving. In fact, a lot of countries, a lot of our neighboring countries has already advanced. Like if you look at China last time, when they have a lot of labor, now their labor are the most skilled and one of the most expensive labor. That's why we are getting a lot from the Indian and from the Bangladesh side of things. And one good example away from property is also foreign domestic workers. I think if we have helpers, we know that the situation right now is quite dire. If we change one, if we want to have one, because they are so highly sought after, the supply is so limited, again, demand and supply. And they are also getting more educated in that sense. So the price will definitely go up. Labor costs will always go up. And you look at Singapore, once we start implementing the minimum wage that a lot of people is advocating, I mean, all these things, there's good and bad, but obviously it will cause labor costs to go up and increase our property price. All right, next up is fuel. I think fuel is the basic block of any kind of material, any kinds of goods and services. In property per se, I think simply would be the transportation of goods, the manufacturing of the materials. All right, fuel cost, when it goes up, will definitely affect property price because construction costs will go up. Raw materials in Singapore is very applicable. It affects a lot because we don't own any raw materials in our own country. We don't have any. We import from other countries. There were reports 1-2 years ago about sand costs going up. It obviously won't go down because they also have demand as they advance, as they develop more. So raw material costs will always be going up, and because we are also importing, there's importing costs, whether it's shipping, fuel costs, whether it's labor to go and move the materials over, these things will always goes up. Okay. In Singapore, I also find that there's a lot of construction hassle. What do I mean by that? All right, you see that on our land, everything is so pretty. We don't have anything on top, right? Like other countries, even just in Malaysia, you will see the electrical cable lines on top, which is very unsightly. But in Singapore, we all manage it very nicely because everything is hidden below. Electrical cable lines, we got our gas pipe, our sewage pipe, our freshwater pipes, our trains, now our north-south corridor, our highway is going to be underground. So when everything is underground, you're going to build a skyscraper, a building that needs the foundation to be drive deep underground. Then there's a lot of implications with different stakeholders involved. Application of different permits, whether this is allowed, whether I have to route across, whether can I build here and there. There's a lot of hassle because land scarcity and there's so many things below, especially in Singapore context. So all these things add up to cost. Definitely. The demand, the lesser supply and the same time cost. Food, obviously, it's one of the basic building blocks of anything. It feeds people, it feeds labor. As it goes up, labor costs will our wages will also increase and will affect property price. Marketing is interesting because I think marketing nowadays is everywhere and so readily available in terms of information. Sorry, it's everywhere and readily available. How do we really stand? How does the developer or even you sell your resale property, even as a property agent, you see that there's a lot of property videos out there. We really want to stand out from the crowd. And the fact that me doing this is also me trying to stand out from everybody, right? So with all these things, with so many information out there, to stand out from the rest, we have to sort of spend more time, spend more money, or simply like, you know, even on Google, how do you even get your property on number one, on Property Guru on number one? Obviously, we have to spend more to refresh it on top. So marketing costs will always goes up. Okay, will always go and that will affect property price. So in general, these are all the building blocks of property that also, in fact, also cause inflation to go up in general, but because it affects property, so your property also rises up along with it. So the last point that I haven't touched, all right, Forex over here. Very interesting, slightly technical. I hope you're staying with me. This is very important. I try to be as clear as possible, clear and short as possible. What do I mean by Forex? Okay, in Singapore, our government actually controls inflation by tweaking our exchange rate. Okay, it is because we are a net import country. That means we import more products and services than export. So a lot of our inflation is what we call import cost inflation. So the only way to reduce the effect of this import inflation on Singaporeans, it is to increase the strength of our currency so that we are able to pay for all these products and services cheaper because of the strength of our Sing dollar. When we are buying all these things, it will be cheaper. So in other words, when there is inflation, the government will have an incentive to increase the strength of our Singapore dollar against a basket of currency. That is the reason why the Sing dollar has always been strong. And of course, we are able to do that, okay, financially because we have a huge reserves, okay, to buy and sell and to at least to hold the price very well. But that is the understanding. So we are using this exchange rate policy to control inflation. As long as inflation goes up, and because we are a net import country, we are importing a lot of things. So our exchange rate, our strength of Sing dollar will always be going up. So what has it got to do with property? It is a good thing, even though probably you don't own any private property, as long as you hold a HDB, okay? And because it's denominated in Sing dollar, when our exchange rate goes up, we are sort of richer, we sort of become richer as compared to the other people around the world. Right? You understand that? So if I put a simple illustration, if you have bought a property in Malaysia maybe 30 to 40 years ago when it was parity, that means a Malaysian ringgit is one is to a Singapore dollar $1. if the property price in Malaysia actually doubles, you still lose money when you bring back the money to Singapore, because their country devalued by 3 times. Their country currency devalued by 3 times. So this exchange rate, the strength of Sing dollar is very important for property. Unknowingly, actually, a lot of Singaporeans, we don't know this fact, but we are always blessed in that sense, I would say. And I hope you all understand this also, because this is why Singaporeans love property, why we are holding property, and we are proud to have one, whether it's a HDB or whether you have a private or more than one, or even commercial property. All right, so in a nutshell, yes, please buy property, please hold your property. It is a good hedge for inflation. I hope you have enjoyed today's sharing. Thank you for joining me, and I'll see you for the next one. Thank you.